Meet OBSBOT Tail Air. That was a lot of fun to make. This video is sponsored by Obsbot. They didn't tell me what to say, so all my opinions in this video are my own. Do with that what you want. As you probably know, I like to do a live stream every once in a while. I think it's fun and I enjoy figuring out all the tech stuff necessary to make a stream happen. Obsbot reached out to me to see if I wanted to test out their new PTZ streaming camera. And while, as you know, I shoot with Lumix mirrorless cameras, this 4K pan-tilt zoom camera with tracking piqued my interest. They sent me the complete kit with 3 tail airs, Ethernet adapters, NDI licenses, remote controller, and ND filters. The standard package comes with 1 tail air, USB-C cable, USB-C splitter, and USB-C to USB-A adapter, all of which fits in this neat little case. I have to admit, I was a bit skeptical at first, thinking it might just be a glorified webcam. But it's much more than that, and it's absolutely packed with features. So sit tight, here we go. The Tail Air has a 1/1.8 inch sensor and a 23mm full frame equivalent f1.8 lens. It can shoot 4K UHD up to 30 frames a second and 1080p up to 60 frames a second. It can send video out over USB-C, NDI, HDMI, and record to a microSD card in H.264 or H.265. It's got a built-in microphone and a 3.5mm input for an external mic or line input. It has AI tracking for humans and animals and can be controlled with gestures to start and stop the tracking, recording, or for zoom control. Or for even more control and direct live streaming, there's the Obsbot Start App. The Tail Air can be powered via USB-C, power over Ethernet, or with the built-in battery. Let's dive a bit deeper into its features. So, is the Tail Air going to fit into your setup? Well, this little camera is very versatile. It has a micro HDMI port and can put out a 4K feed while simultaneously recording to the microSD card. This way, it's set up more like a mirrorless camera with the HDMI cable going into a capture card. Another way you can connect this camera is via USB-C. It gets recognized as a webcam and you're good to go. The third way the Tail Air can be connected is via NDI, wired or wireless over Wi-Fi. NDI stands for Network Device Interface and is a video over IP transmission protocol. It's really easy to set it up with the NDI plugin for OBS, and the latency is about 0.2 seconds with a wired connection. This works really well, even on Wi-Fi, but does require an NDI license for each Tail Air, and for the wired connection, you also need the Ethernet adapter. In terms of power, it's again very flexible. You can just connect a USB-C cable and plug it into the wall, or if you're outside or on the go, you can use it for up to about an hour and a half with its built-in battery, which takes about 19 minutes to charge via USB-C. The third option is power over Ethernet if you use it with the Ethernet adapter for NDI. If your router, or switch doesn't support power over Ethernet, the adapter has got you covered with an additional USB-C port for charging. But where things get really interesting is with the tracking and gesture control. It can track humans and animals, and it does so really well. Even if there's something in between me and the camera for a moment, it'll pick me up again instantly. Very impressive. The speed at which it moves the PTZ head is adjustable as well, from fast to medium to slow. The tracking can be initiated either by using the app, which I'll talk about in a bit, or by using gestures. If I hold up my hand like this, it'll start tracking me. And if I do it again, it'll stop the tracking. And it works quite reliably. But there's more gestures that you can use. This gesture, for example, starts the internal recording, and this gesture zooms in all the way. If you want to zoom in slightly, you can use this gesture and move your hands to the side, and it will zoom in gradually. This last zooming gesture doesn't always work too well, to be honest. I have had some instances as well where I was talking with my hands a bit much and the Tail Air took it as a gesture and started tracking me, for example. But certain gesture controls can also be deactivated from within the app if you don't want to use them. The optional remote controller gives you control over tracking, zooming and recording for 3 Tail Airs. And you can fully control the movement of the cameras with the joystick or set position presets. The Obsbot Start App is available for Android and as of recent also for iOS. The app gives you a ton of control over the camera and can be used to stream out directly to Facebook and YouTube, for example. It's not the most intuitive app, to be honest, and I had to use a translation app with text recognition to change the language to English because it was in Chinese when I first installed it on my old Android tablet. But once you find your way around it, it does work well. First thing I found out is that the app can only be used to control one camera at a time. You can quite easily connect to another one, but it would be nice to be able to stay connected to all of them at the same time and have a multicam view in the app, maybe in the future. What it does have though is what they call AI Director's Grid. It gives you multiple views or crops of the image that you can switch between to give some sense of multicam setup. With the app you can control the PTZ head and set 3 position presets that you can easily switch between. You can control zoom, adjust the framing for when you're tracking someone, turn gestures on and off, change audio settings like levels and noise reduction, and also change the output mode to USB-C, NDI or RTSP. You also have control over the recording codec, frame rate and resolution. I have it set to H.265, 25p in 4K, for example. But if I would be streaming, I would set it to 30 frames a second. You can also start and stop recording from the app. It gets recorded to the microSD card, but you can review that footage from within the app afterwards, which is nice. But for me as a videographer, I was happy to find that there's also decent exposure and image control from within the app. It gives you control over ISO, including ISO limits, shutter speed, white balance, picture profile, but also lets you adjust things like sharpness, contrast, saturation, hue, and brightness. So you can make your own custom profile, which I really like and would also expect from such a camera at this price point. The Tail Air is aimed at streamers, and that's exactly what it can do from within the app. No need for any other software. It's easy to set up and works well, as long as your internet connection is good, of course. This is, however, limited to one camera. Like I said, you can't control multiple Tail Airs from within the app, but you can use the AI Director's Grid to have multiple angles that you can switch between. For a multicam setup with these cameras, the best way would be to go with NDI. It's reliable, fast, and easier to put the cameras into more difficult places. There's also a simple web interface with some control over the camera, but it's very limited. HDMI into a capture card works fine too, but is a bit limited in camera placement. Now, this wouldn't be a camera channel if I wouldn't talk about the image quality. The second angle in this video is shot by a Tail Air and recorded to the SD card. Let me know what you think. I was actually quite impressed by the image quality from this tiny sensor. Well, tiny compared to what I'm used to with my Lumix cameras. It's got lots of detail, colors look decent, and if you're somewhat close to the camera, there's even a nice amount of shallow depth of field. The fact that you can customize the color profile and adjust sharpness helps a lot with the image quality. I dialed down the sharpness and saturation and contrast a bit, and I think the image looks decent. One thing I noticed though is that there's some strange artifacting if you zoom in and look closely. There's some sort of shifting. First I thought that might be the autofocus, so I set it to manual focus, which it can do as well. But the shifting was still there. Not sure what causes it. I suspect it's the noise reduction, but I don't know. Hopefully they will improve that in future firmware. It's got an HDR mode, which sounds good, but I wouldn't recommend using it as it can cause artifacts. And in my opinion, HDR is not necessary in most cases. In low light, it does surprisingly well considering the sensor size. Even though the intended use cases for these cameras aren't low light situations, I think in a pinch the footage is definitely usable. And you know, these cameras are not intended to be used for high-end filmmaking anyway. The continuous autofocus is pretty decent, but struggles in low light and backlit shots. With good lighting, it does a good job though, and is quite reliable. It's also possible to set it to autofocus single or manual focus, which is nice. The Tail Air has a built-in microphone, of which I would straight away say, don't use it. Audio quality is not good, and you can even hear the autofocus motors quite prominently. You're now listening to the Tail Air's built-in mic, which I don't think sounds really good. And you can hear the autofocus motors. Which I think makes the audio basically unusable. But it also has a 3.5mm input. Connect a decent microphone like the Fulaim X5 Wireless mics or just a wired mic and you'll get great audio. It's definitely one of the design features that I can really appreciate. Future me here. So I've discussed this audio issue with Obsbot and they assured me that this issue has been fixed in the production units. So I've got pre-production units, but they will send me a production unit to test out the improvements. And there are more improvements. They've improved the autofocus and they will keep improving that. The shifting in the image, they've told me that that has to do with noise reduction and the movement of the gimbal. And they are trying to optimize that, but it could be at the cost of clarity of the image and raising the noise levels. So it's a bit of a balance there. I don't really mind it. I think the image looks pretty good, but if they can improve it, that would be nice. Another thing we talked about was autofocus in backlit situations. They said they're also optimizing that, but again, it's a balance between autofocus performance in general and autofocus performance in backlit situations. But I think it's already pretty good as it is. I just mentioned it because I noticed it, but it's not a big deal to me. By the way, if you want to see how the Tail Air performs in actual live stream, I did one, a test live stream. I'll link it on screen and in the description if you want to watch it. Let's talk about the potential use cases for the Tail Air. I can think of many use cases, but the ones I think I'm going to be using them for are things like behind the scenes shots, where it can follow me around while I'm shooting with my other cameras. Another use case I will be using it for is shooting conferences. I can set up 3 Tail Airs as a multicam setup and let them follow the speaker that's on stage. This could be recorded footage or a multicam live stream. I think these cameras would also be great for educational streams or videos for things like universities or other educational content. Multicam streaming setups via NDI is where the Tail Air really shines. And I think for the price point, it's a really attractive option. Other than that, it also makes for a great camera for online video meetings via Zoom or any other platform. So let's talk about pricing. The basic set retails for $499, which contains one camera with the standard accessories I mentioned in the beginning, which in my opinion is a reasonable price for what it can do. But as I said, the Tail Air really shines in an NDI multicam setup, which leads me to the Multicam 3 camera kit that comes with 3 NDI licenses, smart remote controller, and micro HDMI to HDMI adapter cables for $23.65. And there are different kits between the basic kit and the multicam. If you intend to use them outdoors, there's also a set of ND filters available that fit on magnetically and are stackable. Let me know what you are going to use the Tail Air for. I have a 5% discount code if you use my affiliate link in the description. Using my affiliate links helps the channel out a lot. Thank you very much. Overall, I think the Tail Air is a great little camera that's extremely flexible in the ways you can set it up and power it. It's got great and smooth tracking, but it's also perfectly controllable with the remote controller or from within the app. There are a few things that I don't like so much though. One is the micro SD card slot. It's very fiddly to get the card in and out. Not a big issue, but I think something that should definitely be improved in a future model. Lastly, there's the app. Though very functional, I think there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of ease of use, interface and intuitivity. And I'd like to see multicam functionality from within the app. Let me know what you think about this little robot. If you have any questions, please let me know. And if this video was helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel and maybe hit that notification bell. And I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.